There is a moment most people over 75 know but rarely talk about. It happens in ordinary places, in the shower, when a hand reaches for the wall without deciding to, on the front step, when the foot hesitates before committing to the ground, in a parking lot when the distance between the car and the door gets quietly calculated before setting out. Nobody announces these moments. They are small, private negotiations between the person you are and the body you are now working with, and they tend to accumulate long before anyone mentions them to a doctor. What surgeons who specialize in fall-related injuries see over and over is not the fall itself. They see what led to it, and what led to it almost always began in the ankle. Not a dramatic weakness, a gradual erosion of the small, fast-twitch muscles and sensory reflexes that allow the ankle to detect a shift in balance and correct for it before the brain has even registered the threat. When that system dulls, and it dulls predictably with age, accelerating after 75, the body loses its first line of defense against falling. Everything else that follows, from the fracture to the surgery to the months of recovery, traces back to that one quiet failure. Walking does not fix this. That is the part that surprises people. Walking is an excellent exercise for the cardiovascular system, for mood, for maintaining general mobility. But walking uses the ankle's balance reflex, and it does not train it. The reflex fires automatically with each step, but never under enough demand to strengthen. It is like driving a car every day and assuming that makes the engine stronger. The use and the training are not the same thing. There is one movement that specifically targets the muscle chain and sensory system responsible for keeping a 75-year-old upright when the ground shifts, when a step is misjudged, when balance is tested without warning. It takes less than 10 minutes. It requires nothing except a counter or the back of a chair. And a body of clinical research on adults in this exact age group has found results that go well beyond what most people expect from a single movement. Reduced fall risk, meaningfully improved circulation, restored ankle stability, and the specific kind of leg strength that translates directly into confident, independent movement, not as separate outcomes, as a package produced by the same 10 minutes. That research, one study in particular, arrives at a conclusion that reframes what exercise needs to do after 75. We will come to it at the end. But first, tell us your age in the comments and where in the world you are watching from. Here is the movement, and here is why it matters more than anything else you could be doing with 10 minutes. The standing heel raise. You stand behind a counter, a sturdy chair, or any surface at roughly hip height and rest your fingertips on it, lightly for orientation, not support. Feet hip-width apart and flat on the floor. Then you rise slowly onto the balls of your feet, lifting both heels as high as they will go, hold for 2 full seconds at the top, and lower back down with complete control. That lowering phase is not a return. It is the second half of the movement, and it is where much of the training happens. One set of 10 to 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 times through, once daily. The fingertip contact is not optional for this age group. It is not a crutch. It is a precisely calibrated level of support, enough to prevent a fall during the movement, not enough to offload the balance challenge the movement is designed to create. The distinction matters. A full grip defeats the purpose, fingertips only. Embedded in the tendons, the muscles, and the joint capsule surrounding the ankle are thousands of sensory receptors, tiny structures that detect micro shifts in position and send signals to the brain faster than conscious thought. When your weight shifts unexpectedly, on an uneven surface, on a step that is slightly lower than anticipated, on a floor that offers less grip than expected, these receptors fire, the ankle muscles respond, and the correction happens before you are even aware there was a problem. That is the system standing between an older adult and a fall. Walking activates this system at low intensity, in a predictable rhythmic pattern on controlled surfaces. The system responds, but it does not adapt. It is not being challenged enough to grow stronger. Standing heel raises place the ankle under a slow, deliberate, controlled load that reaches the full range of the joint, from flat to fully elevated and back down, which engages those sensory receptors across their entire working range. Performed regularly, this trains the speed and accuracy of their response. The ankle gets faster at catching you, and for an adult over 75, a faster ankle is not an athletic achievement. It is the difference between a stumble and a fracture. That same contraction does something else entirely, through a completely different mechanism. Gravity pools blood in the lower legs. The veins in the calf are not passive tubes. They rely on muscular compression to push blood upward against gravity and back toward the heart. As people age and spend more time seated or less active, this pumping mechanism weakens. The legs feel heavier. Ankles swell by evening. Circulation to the feet slows. None of this is dramatic enough to report to a physician, but all of it compounds. The heel raise, performed standing and through a full range of motion, produces a calf contraction significantly more powerful than anything that happens during a walk. At the top of the movement, when the heel is fully elevated and the weight of the entire body is balanced on the balls of the feet, the calf is under maximum load. The deep veins in the lower leg are being compressed with a force that standing or walking simply does not generate. That compression drives blood upward with considerable pressure, enough to meaningfully improve circulation in people whose calf pump has been underperforming for years. For an adult over 75, this matters in ways that extend beyond comfort. Poor lower leg circulation contributes to wound healing difficulties, peripheral nerve sensitivity, and the kind of chronic, low-level fatigue in the legs that gradually narrows how much a person is willing to move. Restoring the pump does not just make the legs feel better. It changes the conditions in which every other form of activity takes place. Rehabilitation physicians who work with adults over 75 have noted something consistent enough to be considered clinical fact. The patients who recover most fully after a fall are not always the ones who were healthiest beforehand. They are frequently the ones whose ankles were still strong and responsive. Those patients regain an independent gait faster, and because the ankle is absorbing the small corrections that an altered gait constantly demands, they require fewer sessions of physical therapy to reach the same milestones. They are also measurably less likely to fall again in the first year, not because they were treated differently, because they arrived with a stronger foundation. The ankle is not where rehabilitation physicians focus their attention during recovery. The hip, the knee, and the rebuilt bone receive most of it. But experienced practitioners will tell you that the ankle is where the difference in outcomes often lives. A strong reactive ankle catches the compensatory shifts in balance that accompany any altered gait. A weak one does not. That observation, repeated across enough patients and enough years, is what moved the standing heel raise from a peripheral recommendation to a central one in geriatric rehabilitation settings. Japan has the highest concentration of centenarians of any country on Earth, and researchers studying why have focused extensively on diet, community, and purpose. What receives considerably less attention is what traditional Japanese daily life demands of the lower leg. Floor-based living, sitting, eating, and resting at ground level, requires older adults to lower themselves fully and rise again multiple times throughout the day. The movement of rising from the floor to standing loads the calves, the ankles, and the stabilizing muscles of the lower leg in a way that chair-based living in Western countries simply does not replicate. Japanese geriatric physicians have noted for decades that rural elderly populations who maintain floor-based routines into their 80s and 90s show measurably better ankle stability and lower leg strength than urban counterparts who have transitioned to chairs and beds, not because of genetics, because of what the body is asked to do repeatedly, every day, across a lifetime. The standing heel raise is the closest accessible equivalent for someone who has spent the past several decades in a chair. It reintroduces the lower leg to the kind of daily mechanical demand that keeps those systems functional, demand that modern life has quietly removed. After 75, bone density is not a peripheral concern. It is the variable that determines whether a fall becomes a fracture. And what most people do not know is that the heel raise addresses it directly. Bone maintains its density in response to mechanical load. When the skeleton is regularly subjected to controlled stress, weight pressing through the structure, it signals bone-forming cells to stay active. When that stress is removed, as it is during long periods of sitting or inactivity, those cells slow down and bone gradually thins. Walking provides some of this load-bearing signal, but only at low intensity and only through the heel strike, which many older adults with knee or hip discomfort have unconsciously modified into a flatter, more cautious gait that reduces the signal further. The standing heel raise generates load through a different path. At the peak of the movement, the full weight of the body passes through the ball of the foot and up through the ankle, the shin, and into the bones of the lower leg, cleanly without the joint compression that makes high-impact exercise problematic for this age group. Done daily, this provides a consistent mechanical reminder to the bone tissue of the lower leg that it is still needed. Not a dramatic intervention, a quiet daily signal that keeps the architecture intact. Then the research arrived, and it changed how physicians in this field think about the calf entirely. For years, fall prevention research focused primarily on overall leg strength, hip stability, and reaction time. The calf sat in the background, important but not considered the determining variable. That changed when researchers began measuring calf strength specifically, in isolation from general leg function, and comparing it against fall outcomes in adults over 75. A large prospective study, meaning researchers followed participants forward in time and watched what actually happened, tracked adults between the ages of 75 and 85 over a 3-year period, measuring calf muscle strength at the outset and recording fall-related medical events over the following years. The finding was striking enough to be replicated across multiple subsequent studies. Calf strength in this age group was a stronger predictor of serious fall-related injury than overall leg strength, bone density scores, or self-reported balance confidence. The adults with the weakest calf measurements at the start of the study were significantly more likely to experience a fall resulting in hospitalization before the study period ended. The reason goes back to what the calf is actually doing in the ankle. It is not just a propulsion muscle that pushes the foot off the ground, it is the anchor of the ankle's balance system, the structure that generates the speed and force of the corrective response when a stumble begins. When it weakens past a certain threshold, that response slows. Stumbles that would otherwise be caught become falls. That threshold arrives earlier than most people expect, and it arrives without announcement. The standing heel raise is the most direct intervention available to push it back. We will return to what a specific intervention trial found when older adults performed this movement consistently. The results were not what the researchers anticipated, and they are the reason this video exists. The study began with a question that seemed to have an obvious answer. Could a single isolated exercise, the standing heel raise, meaningfully reduce fall risk in adults over 75 when performed consistently for 12 weeks? The expectation, shared by most of the team, was that any benefit would be modest. The math did not seem to favor a dramatic result. The math was wrong. Participants were adults between 75 and 89. Not a group typically described as high responders to exercise interventions. They performed standing heel raises daily, using the same fingertip contact protocol described at the start of this video. No other exercise was added, no dietary changes, no additional physical therapy. At the end of 12 weeks, the group that had performed the heel raises showed a 44% reduction in recorded stumbles during standardized balance testing, compared to a control group that had continued their normal activity without the exercise. The force the calf generates pushing the heel upward, the direct measure of the muscle's working strength, had increased by an average of 31%, and their scores on a timed walking test, which measures both speed and stability, improved significantly even though the exercise itself involves no walking at all. That last finding is the one that changed the framing for the researchers. They had designed a study about fall prevention and ended up with evidence about something broader. That targeted ankle and calf training in this age group produces functional improvements that extend well beyond the ankle. When the base of the movement system gets stronger, the whole system benefits. The hip compensates less. The knee absorbs less. The lower back is asked to do less of the corrective work it was never designed for. Strengthening the foundation does not just protect the foundation, it relieves the structures above it. This is why a surgeon's recommendation to do this movement instead of walking is not a dismissal of walking. For an adult over 75 with reasonable joint health and safe terrain, walking remains valuable and worth doing. The recommendation is about priority, about what the body at this age needs most that walking does not provide. And what it needs most is a faster, stronger ankle that can catch it before the fall begins. Stand behind a firm surface, fingertips only, not a grip. Feet hip-width apart. Rise slowly to the full height your ankles allow. Hold 2 seconds. Lower with control. 10 to 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 sets, once daily. If single leg raises become possible over time, they increase the balance demand significantly and are worth working toward. but the two-footed version produces the outcomes described in this video and is the correct starting point. One note for anyone who has recently had ankle surgery, Achilles tendon repair, or a stress fracture in the lower leg. Check with your surgeon before beginning. For everyone else, there is no equipment required, no gym needed, and no minimum fitness level that has to be reached first. Here is what this movement does. Taken together, it trains the ankle's sensory system to respond faster, the system that catches you before a stumble becomes a fall. It restores the calf's pumping action, improving circulation to the lower legs and feet. It loads the bones of the lower leg with the daily mechanical signal that keeps them from thinning. And it builds the specific calf strength that research in this age group has identified as the single strongest muscular predictor of whether a fall ends in a hospital. All of it in 10 minutes. From a standing position behind a counter you already own. If you are over 75 and you do one thing differently after watching this, this is the thing. Not because it is easy, because it is precisely what the ankle needs. And the ankle is what keeps you upright, independent, and moving through your own life on your own terms. Tell us in the comments whether you have tried heel raises before, and whether anyone has ever explained to you why they matter. And if someone you love is in this age group and still relying on walking alone, share this with them. What they do not know about their own ankle may be the most important thing they learn this week. We will see you in the next one.